good to see so many of you here. How many of you are developers? Almost every single one. That's great to see because this is a topic that most developers don't like, so it's good that you are here. It's a talk that I created almost 2 years ago, based on experience that I had coaching teams. Of course, it's evolved over time, but first of all, who am I? I'm Bart Lannoeye. I'm coming from Belgium. And I like to call myself a technical architect because I still try to code from time to time. If it's not on the job, then off the job in my own time. And over the years, I think the last 6, 7 years, I've been a consultant, coached several teams, several projects, and every single time when I came in a team, they were neglecting security either because they didn't know how to do it, or they thought it would be impact them on their productivity. So let's try to fix that. I think over the last 5 years, I had over half a dozen teams that I coached, and I finally found one that did almost everything that I will talk about. So I joined them as head of engineering. I said, "This is a good team. Let's tweak the last final bits." But they were already quite a few steps ahead on most things I've seen. You can find me on Twitter or X these days. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. After the talk or on Twitter, I'm always available to help out. What's not on the agenda today, you're probably or hopefully using some security in your applications, OpenID, OAuth, certificates, API keys. So we will not cover that. What we will cover is what we see as a developer. We try to deliver our software, a cloud solution. And on the other side of the table, there will be a CISO or IT in general saying, no, this is not secure enough, you have to do this and that. So the burdens that we get in that process, we'll try to tackle them today. I've been at both sides, so I've been the bad angry guy, but I've also been in teams where we had to live in a very locked down system. So it's not what I'm going to say here, it's you should do this. I've had to do it myself as well. Since these days we need to cover AI, I added some bonus slides on AI. And apparently the clicker died, or my presentation died. Let's see. Okay. I already started with some AI and generated this. So this session, the intention here is to tickle your brain, the feather side. If you're too stubborn, I can take the pointy stick as well to poke it in. But the idea is to help you think about quite a few topics, and hopefully you'll start doing them from tomorrow in your own project. I've seen this in the past as well. I gave for one of my teams on a public event in Northern Macedonia this talk in some form as well. And the next week they went to their product owner and they said, we want to start doing this. And it was, well, my talk was a success. They say by themselves that they want to do this. So why do you need this talk? It's important to acknowledge that there's always a security risk. And often we human beings are part of that risk, almost always. And no company is small or large enough to not be at risk. I've seen in the past, smaller companies say, we're not big enough, we won't be targeted. Even the smallest company, if you have something of value, they will come after you. Even we as persons sometimes get under attack and they say, you want your picture back? Well, here you have to pay this amount of crypto, for instance. We can do our best to minimize the risks. And then if I say all these things, you will probably say, well, Bart, you're stating the obvious. We all know this. Well, I hope you do. But still, while making the presentation, and I kept them in just to show you the impact and the reality, I tried to find in a time span of a single year some of the big breaches that happened. First one, we had a Microsoft-focused event. Well, they had some issues before as well. In 22 March, they had the lapses breach where someone could take access to an account and code was stolen, information was made available. It can happen to other things as well. Crypto.com had their crypto stolen. A few months ago, I could make a joke that the 30 million was maybe worth only 10 million, but it's going up again, so it's valuable again, so you have to protect that as well. If we look during the COVID vaccinations in the US, a single team had 2 breaches in 2 months' times, both due to misconfigurations. So configuring your cloud assets is part of the job, and if it can happen very easily that you make a mistake. If you look at more, not the configuration part, but the development part, well, hackers targets as a developers as well with typo squatting. And you can say, oh, this is a package to do something against Coinbase. I'm going to start writing some crypto programs. Well, the actual package is this one, and they're just hoping and that you select their package and there's some code in there that's not checked or that's doing wrong things. And as you can see, there are quite some packages that look very similar to the real one, but are actually very malicious. One of the big topics, and we'll cover that one as of the first one to fix, is leaky secrets. At the end or the beginning of 22, Twitch came out in the news that they had a few leaks, and Twitch is quite a big company, would say, that made some news. Not 3 months later, Samsung and Nvidia, 2 more big companies, had to come in the open and say, we leaked some secrets. In the case of Samsung, almost 7,000 secrets. So if you have 7,000 secrets, I think you have access to almost every single piece of data and maybe code that they have. And you would think 3 big companies, we have learned by now. Well, in October, another 7 months later, Toyota had the same issue, another breach with data of almost 300,000 customers. So as you can see, quite a few companies keep on falling in the same trap, so we really have to pay attention to that. And then you can say, will we never learn at some point? So fast forward another 2-3 months. In January, someone made an effort to scan some packages, and they found 57 live AWS keys. Once you have the AWS keys, you can have the data, but also you can do a lot of fun things with it. That's not a good thing to share. If at some point, currently these days, some tools like GitHub already block pushing keys to the cloud, but let's say a while ago, if your key came on the internet, you was almost sure that either your data was gone or it would cost you a lot of money because they started abusing your system to, for instance, crypto mine. And we'll close the circle with Microsoft. So the AI researchers in September 23 exposed a tiny bit of data, confidential data. So again, it's a human error that we have to try to couple or solve. So the question is, will you be next, or even when will you be next? We can be sure that every single company might be targeted at some point in the future, because if you don't have value to bring, why do you have a company? So often in a company, certainly the bigger ones, you have a CISO, Chief Security Officer, and they will say, let's lock everything down. We have to secure our organization. Then IT will say it will cost too much, or finance will say it will cost too much. IT will say it's too much work. And we as developers will say, we can't do our job if we lock everything down. So let's try to cover that. But first, let's look at the cost. Security is finding a balance between cost and risk. You can say on one side of the spectrum, let's secure everything. It will cost you a lot of money, and really mean a lot of money. We once did an assessment for a small-sized company, and we were speaking about several millions just to be at a certain level of security that they could get an insurance. On the other side, if you don't pay that cost of security, then there's the cost of a breach, which can be huge as well, certainly if we look at personal data. So we have to try to find the optimum spot where we want to secure. And then it's a good thing that there is someone with the C-level that they can decide where do we go, and they take responsibility, but a company will have to make that choice. So how do you look at it? There are multiple ways to approach it. Of course, it's very important to know what's the business you're operating in. Are you handling personal information, healthcare, for instance, or do you just have a simple cooking website online? If your cooking website is hacked, you hopefully have a restore, or a backup, you restore that and you're running again. So it's maybe bad for your name, but nothing wrong hopefully happened. You can still mess up people with bad recipes, but still, it's not as bad as leaking personal information. How are you gonna mitigate it? How are you gonna monitor it? Because between an actual breach often and finding out, there's close to a year. So in a year, a lot can happen. They can take over your whole network without you knowing. So the monitoring process is also important as well. Once your company looks into doing this, you will try to identify the threats, assign the likelihood, impact, and cost, and then based on those three factors, you will make a ranking. And of course, at some point, you say the cost is too big for this action compared to the actual either likelihood or impact. You should coach each team. And team is not only we as developers, the developer teams, but also anyone in the organization, be it support, be it even HR, what the impact is of their actions and what they can be impacted by as well. Hopefully, you're all doing some sort of phishing training on emails. Even a few months ago, I assisted one company, and the very first person who clicked it was the CEO. So you should, and it's not a lie, it's for real. So you should really coach those people because often they have quite an impact. Some of the times they even have way too many rights in their environment. So those are the first persons to be targeted. Security is not an afterthought. We have often spoken on conferences, or you already do it, shift left in testing. Well, there is also a shift left in security. The sooner you pick up things, if you start thinking about security in the analysis and the design phase, it will cost much less than finding out on the other side of the spectrum. So also in your company, see if you can pull it forward. It should be part of design. It should be part of development as of day one of your project. And every single step, try to pick up security and pay attention to it. So to go a bit more to the dev side, we will use a use case, your typical website, so nothing fancy. I hope if someone here works in banking that they already do very secure or have a very secure dev lifecycle. But we can make a very simple website. Since we're at a Microsoft conference, I'll run it on Azure. Simple app service, a SQL database and a storage account to have at least two sources of data. And that's about the simplest way to get a website in the cloud, I guess, with some data. And you will be amazed about how many points this can go wrong already. We'll go through a few of them. We've seen the security keys, the leaks, so let's cover that one first. Because once someone is in possession of that key or a password, they can do a lot of bad things. And then we as developers say, I won't commit the key to source control, pinky promise. Because we have some fancy things like in Git, assume unchanged to make sure that the settings file or the config file is not committed. And then a new team member joins the team, doesn't run that command locally. And if you don't go to your favorite Git client, you will see user ID and password. Oops. And then in the past, I had some people, oh, it's in there. Let's go to the next commit. I removed it again, new commit, I removed my secrets. Well, it's still in your Git history. So bad luck there. Of course, I don't have to say use these kind of passwords. I hope you know that already. And then when I speak to developers, they say, well, there's a difference between environments. Of course, I know for production I should not do this, but on development it's so easy that I can quickly connect through it with a connection string during development or local. And then at some point you say, yeah, if you do this for development, who keeps you from doing it for production? I've seen plenty of people say, well, the connection string is here, let's just tweak it to check something in production, because we never do that as developers. And then well, my story works, everything, the bug is fixed, let's commit it, and your production key is in source control. So possible solutions, if we look at secrets, maybe a first one, used to do this several years ago, let the CI/CD tooling do it. You don't have the secret in your config file in your source control, but our CI/CD pipeline can do it, and once it's deployed, it has the right secret to work. What about local development? What if we use actual Azure resources? Some resources like Azure Service Bus are still not available for local development, so we need a solution there. And if you have it deployed, at least to Azure, you can still see them. I'll show you that. So here I have my app service, which has a fancy API. I'll demo it in a minute. I have a weather, and I did some effort, so I have historical weather data as well. So just to be able to call my SQL and my blob account. For those who didn't know yet, you have a console. You have to go to SCM in front, put SCM in front of AzureWebsites.net, which gives you the Kudu console. You can switch to command line or PowerShell. You can browse your site, and here I have app settings. You can even edit that file, but my secret is there as well. And then you say, well, only the people with access to that Kudu console can see that. True, but if I think that in the last 5 years, every single company I joined for a project or coaching, it took me less than 2 days to have access to that. I sometimes even didn't have access to the code base, but I could log into their SQL Server because I had access to this. So, and if you look at quite a few companies, they have a dev team of, let's say, 5 or 10 people, and 40 people have access to this. So it's one way, far from secure, to do it. How should you do it? Azure has something like Azure Key Vault. I hope you all know that already. So put your secrets in there. And then the next question is, of course, what you do about local development, because Key Vault is in the cloud. And if we have Key Vault, don't we need access to that Azure Key Vault instance? Don't we need a password or a connection string to go there? For local development, you can use Secrets Manager. I'll show in a few minutes. But basically, it used to be a command. Now it's right-click in your Explorer and manage the secrets. This is stored in your user profile, so it's not 100% secure, so to say, but it's at least a lot more secure than source control. And if you go to Azure, Azure Key Vault, use managed identities to take away the connection string or the key. What are managed identities? That's a security principle in Azure Entra ID. And you have two types: system assigned, which is part of the actual Azure resource, and user assigned. If you say, we will do microservices and we need 25 app services or functions because we do microservices, you don't want to manage 25 different identities. You will most likely create 1 or 2 and reuse those. So what we're going to do, we're going to give our Azure resource, so the app service, an actual identity, and that can authenticate by giving a role on, in this case, Key Vault. So let's show that. So I have an Azure Key Vault here with 2 secrets, my database and my storage account. And if I go to the access policy, you will see myself. I can do about everything. And then my super secure app service, the identity of that, gets permission to list and get the secrets. This is how you would probably have done it years ago, how some teams still do it. But these days, it's better to switch to role-based access control. So you remove the access policies, and you give the either yourself or the app service in this case a specific role, airbag role, to do things. So here you can see the app service has Key Vault secrets user. So it's a very specific role just to be able to do or read the keys. I won't give them Key Vault administrator like I have here to every single application. Try to limit that. So we quickly touched already role-based access control. I'll go a bit deeper into it. So what is role-based access control? It's a concept that you have on all clouds, but in Azure, you have the security principle, which can be a person, a group of persons, an application, managed identity. You have the role definition, and we all know these probably, owner, contributor, and reader, but those are very general. I try to be specific, but like we saw the key vault secret user. And then we have a certain scope, starting on top with management groups until the actual resource down. So on every single level you can assign roles. And always try to follow the least privilege principle and give someone only access that they need. If they only need to see key vault, or if they only need to see, for instance, cost management, don't give them contributor on everything. Like I said, that one company where 40 people had access, of those 40, 30 were owner on the whole subscription. Again, something that they might not need. Then you have the developers, we as developers, but there's a difference between environments. You know, I want to do everything on development, everything on test, everything on staging, everything on production. Then I come in and then I sit on the other side of the table and I say, in my opinion, developers on production, if I'm in a good day, they can be a reader. But and certain companies, certainly if we think about banking, companies with a lot of personal identifiable information, they don't get even access or read access to production. And then going down, you can slowly increase it a bit. I've even had it where I was on the developer side that we only had some access in development and no access at all in all the rest. And that's totally fine to work on such systems, but you have to be ready for it, of course. First, if we look at the data, if you need to do corrective data actions, which is the typical reason why people need access in production, well, for decent applications, either you have a support tool where you can do that, or as part of the application itself, where you with an administrator role or a similar role can do that. What you should not do, and I hope you don't, is write SQL queries in production. Again, a few months ago, I've seen someone do it in one of my teams, where I wasn't able to lock this down, due to, let's say, company politics, and they actually brought down production. That can happen if you give people the rights to production. So lock that down as much as possible. If you want to restore that, which happens in most companies as well, we should always cleanse the data. That's also part of the security. If you lock down people because we can say, don't give them access to production because you don't want them to bring it down, sure, but you don't want them to see that kind of information either. So if you restore those databases, clean the data so they don't see it. Part of this story is solved through infrastructure as code. The DevOps will touch as well. But what if in case of support? And support can sometimes, if you don't have the right application to do it there, sometimes you need more access. And for that we have PIM, Privileged Identity Management, which is a part of a paying license, Premium P2. In short, you can give elevated access just in time. I always try to add MFA on top as well. Sometimes you require justification. You can also say, just go through it. You can plan it ahead. So say deployments can only be done on Thursday evening after 10 o'clock. Well, you can lock down your PIM to only work in that time span. You can do reviews every few weeks, months, to see if the right people still, if the people still should have access to that role. And you can always see, have either notifications or afterwards audit who did what, who required a new role. So if in my case support needs access to a database, they will use PIM to go in a security group, and that security group has access to the database. So we're going to open the door just in time, and we won't leave it open always. Next point, the pitfall of gray tooling. Most of you probably have seen this already. Who has used it? Only a handful. You're all liars. There's a difference between environments, Bart. We want to use this to deploy to development. Friends, don't let friends right-click deploy. Since you're all here, I assume you're my friends, so I won't let you right-click deploy. You can use that. I would have liked everyone to show that hand. You can use that window to to deploy quickly to Azure, but use it for research, use it for POCs. Don't use it for actual code that goes to production one day. Build and deploy should be done through automated pipelines, CI/CD. I hope you all know this concept already. We will not go deep into it, but what you will do is you will build your code, you will test it, unit test, all the kinds of testing that you have. You have a certain artifact, and that artifact will be deployed to multiple environments, either manually or automatically. But that single artifact is tested once, and we have 4 environments, and you will deploy it to every single one of them. It's all done by a system, not by right-click deploying. But Bart, there's a difference between environments. I know. Before I give into it, let's do a quick recap first. If you look at security, in this case, this talk mainly goes about security. There's a lot of reasons why you should do testing, why you should do CI/CD. But looking at security, we have multiple environments. We don't want to leak our secrets. So we won't put them in config, we won't put them in source control. We want to make sure that we don't break production manually, because you won't have the rights to deploy. Even if the tooling is in Visual Studio, you won't have the rights. You won't be able to break production. You will always be able to, but depending on what you put in source control, but not by deploying to the incorrect environment, because we will use our pipelines, will use a security principle for each environment. So a development environment can only be targeted by the development security principle. So in that case, we won't go to another environment. We try to prevent lateral breaches by limiting the role-based access control going up, but also by using the different accounts. And we will try to prevent non-production data breaches by cleaning data before we restore it to another production. A quick recap. But since you have been nagging, or I have been nagging, and my alter ego has been nagging for multiple environments, because if you lock everything down, Bart, I can't do work. I need to try out things. I'll give you another environment, the sandbox environment, which can be one or multiple subscriptions next to your non-production production subscriptions. And based on the needs of your company, you can either onboard them on your main Active Directory or now Entra ID, or you can onboard them onto a sandbox Entra ID, which in most companies, certainly if you have some data to secure, is a good idea. And then we put management groups and policies on top of it. So things that are done here are much more open. You can do basically what you want, except maybe spin up a VM in Brazil and start mining Bitcoin. We'll try to lock that down, but that's then done through policies. So, looking at the time, we covered most of the dev part already, but sadly cloud, or sadly, could be depending how you look at it, cloud is more than just writing code. We're entering the DevOps part, so the operations part gets closer to us as developers as well. And since we're on the internet, we have a network, and people who are old enough, and like me, maybe are getting some gray hair, know this picture, how it used to be on-prem. We have our enterprise LAN, we have a big firewall in between, a DMZ zone, another big firewall, and the internet. And normally they did set this up correctly, so the internet can't go into the enterprise LAN. Normally, sometimes it didn't work that well. So on Azure, there are a lot of things, windows we can leave open in the networking part. I'll quickly show it here. So we have the good thing about Azure is networking is under the networking page. As you can see, my key vault allow public access from all networks. So it's all open. Everyone can access it too. Same with the app service. There's nothing in front of it, no firewall or similar. And those who have used Azure SQL before or actually looked at it, they know that by default, Azure SQL, I'll maybe show the code as well. They know by default that Azure SQL has some firewalling in place. So what I will do here, I have a very fancy query, select one. I'm not even going to any table, but this is enough to trigger a round trip to your actual SQL server. So if at some point you want to write your own health checks, for instance, select one, does a round trip, good enough to know the performance, but also if is it available. The actual code, I will get my connection string from my config file because it's still in there, very unsecure. I will just connect to SQL, execute the query. So if I hit this endpoint, try it out, it throws an exception. Cannot open server requested by the login client with IP address. So since we are developers, we will fix that. We go into SQL Server, the actual the server part, networking as well, as you can see here. And by default, Microsoft already says selected networks. I could disable access totally, but there's a nice link here or a button, depending how you see it. Add the client IP address, save, run, go. If I should run, if I hit it again, now it will work. I've seen a lot of teams doing that. I've done it a few times for demo purposes as well. And you can see I have quite a few IP addresses in here. A while ago, I did clean a few up, but I can't remember which hotel this is. And for the rest, no idea either. So as you can see, very secure. Even for new projects that I've seen, it took them less than 2 weeks to have 10, 20 IP addresses in here. So some of them, if you have a good provider, the home might be still the correct one. I don't know. Some IP addresses or homes change every single day while you're just opening a lot of holes. It's already work to put it in there, but you're opening up a lot of holes in your network. Storage accounts I didn't show, but that's just open as well, networking. So every single piece of our solution has networking issues. If you're trying to be a smart guy and say, well, the database is not crossed, well, that's because it's a resource on the SQL Server. I could have done an Azure container here as well. That's similar, but every single piece is reachable. If you look at cloud networking security, networking, another big topic we like as developers. Sadly, in cloud you have to do it. Azure Virtual Network is your primary component. And then, since we work with PaaS resources, let's take the app service, the key vault, those are shared for everyone using Azure. So we will try to pull that in our own VNet, and it's done with a private endpoint and private link. Once you have everything secure in your network, you of course need to expose it back to the outer world. Your API, your website has to be reachable, but hopefully in a secure way. Is it still hosted in a VM, for instance, you will most likely look at something like Azure Firewall or a third-party firewall. Is it on top of app services or functions or so? Depending, is it regional or global, you will look at a front door, application gateway, an API, maybe put it in an API manager, which is part security, but it has a lot extra as well. Those are a few of the components that you can use. I'll show you later, but you can find more information on how you should set it up. If we look at how does it look at as a possible solution, we have our own network here. We pull in all these PaaS components with our private endpoints. We have our app service running inside our VNet, API management on top of it, a front door, as an extra check in front of it, also a CDN for your static website. That looks very secure, at least from a networking side, if you don't start poking holes into it. It also looks very expensive. Some of these resources are slowly getting cheaper tiers which work with networking, like API management. If you look at standard V2, brings the cost quite a bit down, because otherwise you were already paying $2,700 or so a month. Service bus is another of those services that still needs some tweaking on the pricing, but like we said before, security and pricing, you will also always have to look at what's the balance. And then we as developers complaining again because everything is locked down network-wise. We can't deploy manually anymore. Good, in my opinion. We can't deploy with CI/CD because we can't reach that app service or that SQL because that's part of the network. And my Azure DevOps agents, my GitHub agents are outside of the network. Well, you can open your network again, but we don't want to do that. So the typical solution here is self-hosted machines, either on VMs or containers. GitHub Actions already can go in through your VNet, so they solved that already there. So hopefully one day they will do the same for Azure DevOps. If you use something else, you will have to go again to the self-hosted ones. We can't access the path components to verify changes. If you still want your support to be able to log in into SQL, which is not always smart, but they want to do it, they have to get into your network. You can look at Azure Bastion, which is simply a jump host. You can say, I have an Azure Client VPN to my network, or use Azure DevBox, which is basically a dev VM already in the cloud that you can use to get into your network again in a secure way. So don't start opening up your network. On SQL, I haven't showed that, but here at the bottom, there's also a nice exception. Allow Azure services. So at one customer, we had to deploy to their SQL, which was secure, and say either they didn't want to host their own build agents. I say either we let the pipeline always add a rule, deploy, and remove the rule again, or being very lazy, you can check this, of course. They took that one. Allow Azure services. That means allow all Azure services. So Azure DevOps is running on Azure. If you check that checkbox, your Azure DevOps can go directly to your SQL Server. Everyone else, the DevOps or app service or function or anything running in Azure can go there as well if they have the credentials to log in. All these kind of things look expensive as well. So, like I said, security is finding the balance between cost and risks. What are you building? Are you building that recipe website? Well, you maybe don't need a full blown out VNet with API management and everything. You can, but it will be very costly for your recipe website. If you're an organization with a lot of personal information, you should look at that. Like I said, the company I joined as head of engineering, I was very happy to see when I came there that they had all this in place. They had regional failover, even to across continents. So some companies do it, and depending on what you do, really consider going that next step. We are developers, and there's something like procrastination. Who has not heard of procrastination yet? Only a few. You might all say, Bart, we believe what you say, but since we're, like you can see in this, we touched in the keynote, we're working in Scrum, so we work on features first, and then we will add security before we go live. And then I say we should know better. When was the last time you did underestimate the complexity of something you don't do every single day? I don't think most of us don't do security every single day. When was the last time you did finish a large project without bugs, on time, and had enough time spare time to implement something extra as complex as security? And when was the last time you implemented a major change the week before going before a release, didn't regret it? We've all been there. Security is not an afterthought. Yeah, I said it before. Think about shift left for security as well. Try to bring it in your even analysis phase, but in your development phase from day one. The code I show, the very first commit, we'll set up a new project, see if we have the connectivity to SQL Server. Yes, commit. Well, your secret is already in there. Start from the very first commit that you think about security. But AI will solve everything, right? We'll just use ChatGPT for all our hard problems. Sadly, I've seen people do that as well. There is security risk in AI as well, and since we started up with a whole series of leaks, I tried to add another one. If you look here, May 23 is already almost a year ago. Samsung did ban the use of AI because they leaked sensitive information into ChatGPT. Some companies do it for fun and try to train ChatGPT if you ask a question that you come on their product or their business model. But sadly, if it learns the good things, it also learns about your own intellectual property. And it's a great tool, but a lot of people use it, and then you see some IP leaking in there. So is AI the next level of social engineering? It's another way to trick us into sharing information, sort of say, will we leak by accident? We already did, and I think most teams use it at some point. I've seen it used for simply asking questions on user stories. I've seen it on implementing. There are multiple ways, and every single time you're leaking a bit of your information. Will companies build AI solutions to actually steal those trade secrets? If they have not done it yet, they probably have, but they will certainly do. So you should start using secure and responsible AI and coach your people. If we look again at the Microsoft environment, we have Azure OpenAI, we have Copilot 365 a bit more recently, which can go through, for instance, all your documentation, which I already use at my current company now. We have quite a big set of documentation, as we developers don't like to write them, I know, but at some point you have documentation. And then the next step is we have that big pile of documentation, but we don't use it because we can't find our own child in there. If you use something like Copilot 365 in a secure way, people can use AI to get information out of your whole user documentation. The benefit with these kind of solutions, there are other solutions and a third party as well, is that your model and your data is in your tenant of the OpenAI. You will pay for it. That's maybe the downside, but you pay for the security. So conclusion, define your security needs of your project from the start, from the single day one, fine-tune them going forward. Also, depending on the cost, what do you want to pay for it? Implement them as soon as possible. Coach your teams, very important. You can all sit here and say, we want to do this, but if your CEO clicks the next phishing link and has owner access on all your Azure resources, well, there's no use then. Get the help of experts, either internally but also externally for some things. We all know our things. We are all experts in some domain, but sometimes it's wise to get a security expert in your company as well. Have tools in place, some tools we didn't mention yet. So during CI/CD, you can do code analysis depending on which place you host your code. Like I said, GitHub already blocks pushing secrets, but there are also Git hooks to help you there. You have Azure Defender, Azure Sentinel, third-party tooling as well. Make sure that your company starts using those toolings to have a secure development process. Resources, as always, Microsoft Docs and Microsoft Learn. If you've seen how much they improved over the years, these days they are my primary source of information that I share with the team. Cloud Adoption Framework, well-adopted framework as well for Azure. Those are proven approaches by hundreds of companies. So they have tested them. Microsoft has also tested them and proven them, used them. The Azure Architecture Center, which is my last stop here. So if you go to the Azure Architecture Center, you can browse architectures. There are close to 900 of them. If you enter the keyword secure, you get another 400 results. And if you scroll down, of course, it's gone. It's here now. E-commerce website running on Azure in a secure environment. You will see if I zoom in, they have a virtual network. They have an application gateway in front. It's very similar to what I've shown before as well. So if you want to get started, certainly don't reinvent the wheel. Go look there. A lot of scenarios are already written out with images, but also text. If you want to go for certifications, in my opinion, it's good to learn it already. If you do the actual exam, I don't care, sort of say, but the learn part already helps. Azure developer, in my opinion, every single one should have gone through this path to learn it. If you're focusing more on the security part, there are other ones like the AZ500 to do that. So, and with that, I thank you for your attention. I see we're just on time, so if there are any questions, feel free to stop by afterwards. And thank you.